Well, Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is set to hand down probably the most significant federal budget in modern history, following a devastating year of economic damage brought on by bushfires and the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, the Queensland government has launched its first advertising campaign in the lead-up to this state election.
I had to make tough decisions recently. Closing borders was a big step, but my first job has to be to protect Queensland lives. I make no apologies for that.
Well, joining me now is the leader of One Nation, Pauline Hanson. Pauline, a lot to unpack tonight. Let's kick off with the budget. Tomorrow night, Josh Frydenberg faces a Herculean task in trying to turn this economy around. What are you hoping for and what are you expecting from tomorrow night?
Well, Peter, I'd like to see new money put into infrastructure projects throughout Australia. And I've been talking to the government about Great Keppel Island, where I believe that money needs to be back there, plus also the support from the federal government. Now, it doesn't need much money, possibly about $50 to $100 million. And that will be a $1.5 billion project, 500 people ready to go. It's shovel ready, and it will create just over 6,200 indirect jobs. These are things that we need to happen. We need a tourist industry in Australia and especially in Queensland, whereas a lot of people will not be travelling overseas. So I think protect the tourist industry, encourage people to actually stay in Australia. So infrastructure and manufacturing, very important. I'd like to see them back more Australian-owned businesses and companies. Forget about the foreign investors. They come down here, they don't pay their fair share of tax, they take the money out of the country, and we're buying cheap imported products from overseas, propping up their businesses, their workers, not our own. There's a lot I'd like to say, Peter, but we'll see what happens in the budget tomorrow. And, you know, I'm just so blind, like everyone else, we don't know what to expect.
Will you support, I mean, you're a key Senate figure now, will you support personal income tax cuts of the variety that the federal government is talking about now? Of course, the tranche 2 is being supported by Labor, but they're saying they won't support the tranche 3, which is the big, significant tax cuts, particularly for high income earners.
I do support it. I think that we are so heavily taxed in this country that we need to address our taxation, and I do believe that if you actually give people more money in their pockets, they will actually go out there to spend it, and it will actually create more jobs in our economy. And I think it is the way to go. When they talk about the Greens and the Labor Party talking we should put it in more into services and welfare sector, well, we're getting a lot of people third and fourth and fifth generation on welfare. They will never get a job. They don't want to work. And so therefore, you know, if you keep paying them more and more money, they won't, that's more incentive not to get a job. So we actually need to look at it, because you've got about 40% of the populace paying taxes now, propping up the other 60%. We have to get over this COVID, and we have to get back to a working nation, a productive nation that is getting people in the workforce paying the taxes, which will actually give us the services that we need. So it's got to be handled very, very carefully, and how the government is going to go about it, I'll be keeping quite an eye on it.
Pauline, we're going to get to some polling figures, some Courier Mail YouGov polling figures very shortly. But a couple of things. The Premier of Queensland, Annastacia Palaszczuk, has ruled out any deals with the Greens. She says she won't be going down that path if she has to form minority government. But also both One Nation and the Katter Party today, well, according to the reports, now you can debunk that if you like, have said that they'll be handing out 2 sets of how to vote. So one if you want to preference the LNP, and another if you want to preference Labor. You leave it up to your supporters to determine where their preferences go.
That's correct, Peter. You know, in the past, I've been ridiculed by both the major political parties and the Greens, and preferenced last. So therefore, you know, they've done everything they can to stop One Nation from winning seats in Parliament. You know, that was all about, this is their territory, we're not going to allow anyone else in. So it's been extremely hard for One Nation to actually gain seats in Parliament. And what I'm trying to do is educate the public, to tell them, you own your preference. You mark the ballot paper, not the political parties. The how to vote cards that are put out by political parties or independents is only a recommendation. You don't need to follow it. But it's quite amazing. I speak to people, even as of yesterday, you know, people in their 50s and 70s, and those from 14 up to 80 that don't understand our voting system. The major political parties have treated them like mushrooms and don't want to tell them how our system works, and they blame me because I've put either Liberal or Labor into government. That's not the case. I say to people, wake up, understand how this preference system works. You control your vote. You make sure you vote for who you believe is going to be the best representative of this state.
Let's have a look at some of these polling figures which have just come out. They're on the Courier Mail website as we speak. The first major poll in about 3 months in Queensland. Now, if you're a Labor supporter, you're going to be happy with these figures. The two-party preferred in Queensland right now, if an election were held today, the Labor Party would sweep to victory. 52-48 is the two-party preferred vote to the Labor Party. Now, in Brisbane, they're up 58-42. Those are extraordinary figures in Brisbane. In the regions, the LNP holds command 53-47. There's been a bit of a resurgence for the Labor Party on the Gold and Sunshine Coasts, which are traditionally strong Liberal Party areas. Now, Pauline, One Nation, according to this poll, and I'm sure you'll have something to say about this, your vote, your One Nation Party vote, has gone from 13% down to 9%. And in the regions, which is your stronghold, you're down from 21 to 14%. Are you disappointed with those figures?
Peter, they're a load of rubbish, all right? Now, the fact is, the last election, they said we actually would poll, our polling was coming at 3%. What did we end up with? 13%. They're saying we're down on last year's last election. Out of 91 seats, we only stood 62 candidates, but they're doing it right across the state on the number of seats in total compared to the number of candidates we stood. The Labor Party polling, they're really concerned because the Labor Party are really concerned about all seats north of the Tropic of Capricornia. So anyway, they're really worried about those seats there. Peter, I don't believe this polling. It's never been proven to be right, the polling that they've done. Prior to elections, they do this to One Nation every time. They say that we're polling poorly, so it's putting a message to people, oh, look, don't waste your vote with One Nation, they're not going to go anywhere. All this left-wing media do it all the time, that they try and discredit One Nation. I'm on the ground. I talk to people. The support is absolutely amazing. And I tell you, I believe that we are in line to win quite a few seats, and it was because of the Liberal Party's preferences at the last election. They didn't preference us in Therangoa and Logan the last election, and they handed that seat back to the Labor Party. If they'd preferenced us, we would have actually thrown the Labor Party out and been a coalition government with the LNP. But they didn't do it. So, you know, it's not about One Nation destroying or putting Labor in. It was the LNP that did it at the last election. So my attitude is in this election is that LNP won't win government by themselves. There's no way in the wide world they can. And the Labor Party is an opportunity to throw them out. Don't give them government with the Greens. Heaven help this state, because they will go in a coalition with the Greens if the LNP vote for the Greens. Of course they will. And I wouldn't trust Annastacia Palaszczuk. And listening to that, I'm sorry to go on, Peter, listening to what she said, she's worried about the health of Queenslanders. The hell she is. She actually has stopped Queenslanders from getting those necessary operations to save their lives in the state. And I know for a fact, because I actually had it out with Stephen Miles with one Queenslander lady who was possibly on her deathbed if she didn't go fund me page to get that private operation or another kid. So I know for a fact. She said the Queensland hospitals were for Queenslanders. No, they weren't, because she denied people that health care that they needed. I wouldn't trust her as far as I can throw her.
All right, well, Pauline, we've got 26 days to go. A week's a long time in politics. 4.5 weeks is a lifetime. Great to see you tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Peter. My pleasure. Thank you.